Welcome, Game of Thrones fans. We are back for the second episode of House of the Dragon, titled The Rogue Prince. A lot going on as usual. Just make sure if you haven't, check out my first recap of episode one. And of course, if you like the content, like and subscribe. So, let's get right into it. As you can see from the title, I've obviously watched the original Game of Thrones, and like a lot of you, you're seeing parallels from what we saw in the original series and what we're seeing now. And the biggest one is our good King Viserys. I am looking at him, I'm like, is this Ned reincarnated? I mean, it almost feels like we're seeing the same exact mistakes that we saw in season one of the original series. It's not really all about honor with him like it was with Ned, but he's still not reading the room. So let's get right into the issues that I'm having with him off the bat. So number one, we're starting off knowing that the free cities are in disarray. We have somebody out there called the Crab Feeder, lovely name by the way, that is wreaking havoc over there on the Stepstones. He's backed by the free cities. He's essentially pirate who is kidnapping all of their ships and feeding everyone on the beach to the crabs. Very horrific scenes that we're seeing, almost like it feels like you fell into a horror movie the way those scenes are. And the crab feeder, he looks terrific. That's one thing that's been great about Game of Thrones. If they have so many secondary characters that are just fascinating on their own and have their own lore. I'm trying not to get too attached to him, even though he has a great look. I'm anticipating he's going to get eradicated next week when when the dragons come through. But he looks great. We can at least say that, going so far. But back to how that ties into with Viserys, Corlys, his men are getting butchered. He's losing ships, and he wants the king to attack. He wants the king to show some strength and actually, you know, show some backbone essentially. And Viserys doesn't want to do that. He's essentially living by the mantra that, I'm going to avoid war until it's unavoidable, which is something that he tells Corlys. And Corlys is like, look, you can either sail through the storm or you can sail around it. But essentially, you can't really avoid it. You're going to have to deal with it at some point. And Corliss is his biggest, or can be his biggest asset. He controls the Navy. It's the second biggest house. It's the house that descends from old Valeria. So there's a strong connection already. And then, of course, Rhaenys is married to Corliss. So that is someone that he needs to keep on his side. And, Corliss makes a beautiful power play. After they have kind of that blow up in the council about, him not willing to go to war, he essentially tells them the way that we can rectify this and solidify our bonds are to unite our houses. This is like 6 months after Queen Emma has died, and Corlys tells him that, why don't you marry my daughter? That'll solidify our bond. We can combine our forces, and then we'll be unstoppable at that point. But there's a few problems with that. Number one, Viserys is smitten with someone else. And number two, Lainey's, the daughter, Corliss's daughter, is a child. She is 12 years old, looks about 8 or 9. There's no connection there. And this is strictly for political purposes. And Viserys is not really that type of guy. He's not someone kind of like Ned. Ned always has to do his duty. The series is like that to a degree, but he follows his emotions. So while I'm getting Ned vibes, I'm also getting Robb Stark vibes, someone that goes with his heart. And we saw how disastrous that was for Robb in the original series. And it feels like we're going down that path with with Viserys because essentially his only confidant has been Alicent. She's been comforting him when he has his stone, going through the histories of the stone sculptures. It almost looks like a big Lego set for ancient times. He's going through the old Valeria histories, confiding in her. He's telling her to keep it secret. Don't talk to your friend, my daughter Rhaenyra about all this. I want to be able to trust you. And she has that innocence and that warmth that he's missing because Emma used to be that that space for him where he could be vulnerable and all that, and he hasn't had that in 6 months. And while Alicent is not all of those things because she's still essentially a teenager, she still has some of that warmth and innocence that I think he yearns for, and that's why he's so getting so connected to her. And that's exactly what Otto Hightower, he knew that would happen, and that's why he's continually making sure that Alicent is going with him, spending that quality time, getting used to her. It's almost like he spends more time with her than he does with his daughter, and that's another big issue. So all of that leads to a decision that I feel is going to be disastrous. When he finally decides that he has to do his duty as a king and remarry, even though he's, picked Rhaenyra as the heir, he still feels like he has to solidify his family by, marrying and propagating the line. Even though Rhaenyra is going to be the next in line, it feels like he's not certain that she's going to have children. I think he knows deep down that she's more so like a wartime leader than, someone that's going to be just focused on bearing a bunch of children. So he wants to make sure that the line doesn't die out and that there's other ones around to solidify the family, which is what he tells her. That's how he frames it to Rhaenyra, like, this isn't going to interfere with you being next in line and all that. I just have to do my kingly duty, which she seems to understand. But the problem with Viserys is he never tells the full picture to her. That would have been his opportunity when they had that sit down for him to tell her, like, look, I'm going to marry, Alicent. I don't want this to come between us. This is my reason and why. He doesn't say any of that. So not only is he shocked his daughter and she feels betrayed when he finally tells, the council who he's going to marry, he also makes an enemy out of Corlys because Corlys, he wasn't given the guarantee that they're going to get married as far as his daughter Rhaenys, but he kind of felt that he had a good chance. So when he calls his meeting and says he's going to marry Alicent, it feels completely out of left field. Corlys is very upset. He calls it an affront. He feels insulted. And when with marriage proposals, when people feel insulted, bad things happen. We remember the Red Wedding and all that stuff that happened. We don't know if it's going to go down that far with this situation, but that's what it's looking like because we find Corlys later on talking with who? Talking with Daemon. And he's essentially saying we need to solidify our partnership. We are basically second sons in this world. And the only way that we can move up is by showing everyone our power. And by showing our power, that can legitimize both of our claims. So essentially, at this point, he is trying to back Daemon into a coup. But here's the interesting thing. As much animus as Daemon has with his brother, as much as we saw that big confrontation that happened where he stole the dragon's egg, where he had the confrontation with Otto outside of Dragonstone, all that good stuff, like he's ready for war. But I still am hesitant to think he'll pull that actual trigger and betray his brother because he does love his family dearly. We see, and even in the conversation with Corlys, when Corlys is starting to um, rain down the shortcomings of his brother, King Viserys, Daemon stops him and tells him, I can talk about my brother, but you can't. You're not family. And then we see on the confrontation with Otto Hightower at Dragonstone, the only thing that makes him stand down and puts his sword away is when he sees his niece, Rhaenyra. The one, he cannot lift his sword to family. And on top of that, he gives her the dragon's egg back. He completely falls back on his claim because he cannot raise his sword to family. As much of a fierce competitor and warrior that he is, he still values his family. So, with that said, if he does enter into this partnership with Corlys, is it going to be a short-term partnership? I can see him doing this and then pushing Corlys out the picture and taking over the Navy as well. So I'm very interested to see what Daemon does because I still feel like, yes, he has ambition. Yes, he doesn't feel his brother is fit for the throne, but he doesn't have that betrayal in him as of yet. So something has to happen for him to make that leap. It has to be some further betrayal in his mind from his brother, and I can't see that happening at this point. So it'll be very interesting to see how it gets to that point, if it gets to that point where they end up being in open warfare. Right now I don't see it. So, and just for those of you who haven't watched the previous video, I have not read Fire and Blood. So, I'm still kind of in the dark there about exactly what's going to happen. So I'm really shooting in the dark as far as where I think the storyline is going. So with the series, I don't really feel he has any allies now except for maybe Otto. Because remember, he talked to Lord Lionel, who I feel like is going to be another wild card character, because he goes to him and he says, I want somebody to give me their honest opinion, their unencumbered opinion. And I feel like Lord Lionel had kind of like a Littlefinger moment, like when Littlefinger recommended to Ned exactly what he needed to do to preserve the throne, and Ned wasn't willing to do it. And then he had the confrontation with Cersei, ended up with him being arrested because Littlefinger realized that he didn't have the stomach to do what needed to be done to preserve the crown, and that made him weak. And I feel like this same exact thing happened with Viserys, because Lionel flat out tells him, look, the best move to make would be to marry Lena. I know she's only 12 years old. She's going to mature eventually. You'll be able to have kids with her, and you'll be able to have Corlys at your side. You'll have the sea snake and all of his navy at your disposal. It solidifies your power and it protects your family line. That is the move to make. And as we see, Viserys was not willing to do that. He went with his heart and essentially puts the crown more vulnerable and more into disarray. And it almost flies in the face of what Rhaeny said when she was talking with Rhaenyra. She said, "Your father is no fool, and he knows that the crown is not going to be, or the kingdom is not going to be really willing to serve under a queen. They would rather burn the realm to the ground than do that." And you're saying he's not a fool, but this was a foolish move. I mean, yes, not cool marrying a 12-year-old. Yes, you want to be with married to somebody that you at least have a connection with and all that, but you are putting your entire family in danger, starting with Rhaenyra. So it's hard for me to really kind of justify this move on any level. And I can only see it ending in disaster. And then we also have to realize his health is at risk. They touched on it when he's having the maggot therapy, that he's in danger of losing his pinky digit, I believe, on his left hand, all from that cut that he had on the throne that has gotten worse. And that makes me wonder. I'm like, I've always had my eye on Otto Hightower, whether he's really has the king's best interests at heart. I think at this point, it's in his best interest to keep the king alive. So I don't think he's secretly poisoning him or anything, but he's physically born vulnerable. And then he's really going to be under the control of the Hightowers, because everything that Alicent does, because she is so focused on trying to win her father's favor, she's willing to do whatever her father tells her to keep the king under her sway. So that is going to be strengthened even more. So that's where we're at with the series. Let me know what you think about his moves and everything. Do you support anything that he did, or do you feel like I did, that he made like the worst possible moves this entire episode? So the next thing I wanted to touch on was Corlys. I mentioned him a lot with the series. We know that Corlys and his wife Rhaenys are on the same page with the marriage proposal of their daughter. We know exactly why they did that and what their motivations are. But I'm interested to know whether she is supporting his move that he made with Daemon, that secret partnership. Is she aware of that? And is she willing to go that route where she potentially tries to overthrow, her family, in order to get Daemon on the crown? I know Damon is family too, but I always kind of got the impression that she was closer with Viserys than she is with Damon. So that's going to be interesting to find out, because the way Rhaenys presents herself, I feel like she's one of those puppet masters. So I feel like all of these moves are kind of coming from her to a degree. And not saying that Corlys isn't his own man and everything, but he has a temper, and Rhaenys seems to be more of the strategist, the one that'll calm him down and say, this is what we need to do. This is what makes the most logical sense. So I feel like she's the one behind all of this. And even you kind of see that with Rhaenyra. She's trying to get Rhaenyra on her side, because Rhaenyra is still in when she talks, it almost reminds you of Daenerys. But Daenerys talked about before, I'm going to break the wheel. I'm going to create a new standard as queen. And that's what Rhaenyra was saying. She's like, they weren't ready for you when it was time for you to be queen, Rhaeny, but my time is now, and I'm going to be able to create a new order. And Rhaeny is like, you're so ideal, the idealism of youth, but that's not the way the world works. It's not going to happen like that. And our best bet would be to have a man in control, that I mean a man as the face that we're controlling behind the scenes. And I feel like the Rhaenys has realized that in her older age, and she's doing all of this through Corlys, all these sneak dealings and everything that we're seeing. So keep an eye on Rhaenys. That's like my big wild card character. I feel like she's going to be very important as far as what happens in the series. I'm not going to go as far as the claim that she's like the Cersei of this series, this Game of Thrones series or Song of Ice and Fire series, but because she's a lot more cunning and a lot smarter than Cersei, and that makes her more dangerous. But I feel like she's the one out of everybody that's the smartest, that sees the entire playing field and is not getting wrapped up in emotions and feeling insulted and having too much pride like Corlys and then, Daemon are doing. So keep an eye on Rhaenys. I feel like that's our biggest wild card character. So, also I want to touch on Alicent. Alicent is one of my favorite characters. She's so, I know some people were trying to say like she's like Marguerite. Marguerite was a lot more cunning and a lot smarter, to a degree. Alicent at this point still has a lot of her innocence, and you really feel for her. That habit that we saw in the first episode is becoming more pronounced. Her biting her nails and messing up her hands and everything because she's so nervous. And that lets you know that she is completely out of depth in this political realm. Playing these games and everything is not her forte. It stresses her out, it makes her upset. It's the complete opposite of Rhaenys. Rhaenys is at home with this stuff. She's ready for war. You saw her in the council at the beginning of the episode. She was talking about, well, if this crab feeder is giving us problems, send me over there. I can do a show of force and we can handle this. So we know that she's ready for action. And when it comes to warfare, even though she's young, that's not something that she's going to shy away from. When on the other hand, I don't feel like Alicent has any type of skill there whatsoever. Her skill is more emotional manipulation. And, I hate to say it like that because she's so young, but you can see that manipulation when she was talking with Rhaenyra. I think part of her does, have strong feelings and love for Rhaenyra. So when she was telling her how to pray and everything, I do think some of that was genuine. But on the other hand, she knows how to delicately balance her relationship with, or she did with Rhaenyra and with the king, kind of holding their secrets, but subtly kind of pushing them both towards each other so they stay, having a good relationship. But all that's kind of going to be eradicated now because we saw how hurt Rhaenyra was when Viserys selected Alicent as his future queen. So I feel like that's going to be, I'm really looking forward to seeing more scenes in the future between Alicent and Rhaenyra now that the structure of their relationship is completely flipped. Before, to a degree, Alicent was really just her handmaiden, her help. And now Alicent is going to be her queen. So that is going to be very, very interesting to see. Uh, One other thing with Rhaenyra that you might have missed, she talked about, they have a King's Guard opening, they're trying to get a new King's Guard member. And one of the things that really irritated Rhaenyra is that none of these guys had any fighting experience. All of them were just tourney knights. And Rhaenyra, her main condition of making sure Criston Cole got picked was that he had experience, fighting the incursions with the Dornish. So that made her comfortable picking him as somebody to guard her father. Now, the reason why I think that is so important is because we know Rhaenyra is going to be the eventual heir. So the more people that's on the King's Guard that she has a good relationship with, the better. Because number one, that's going to be a less of a chance of betrayal. And when things hit the fan, it's going to hit the fan some type of way, whether it's Daemon or Corlys, or when Viserys dies, which I'm predicting is probably going to happen at the end of this season, whether by treachery or whether by the the rot on his hand getting worse and spreading to other body parts. So when that happens, when Viserys is out of here and the crown is in disarray, Rhaenyra is going to have to depend on the Kingsguard and is going to have to depend on them having complete loyalty to her and not Daemon or Corlys or Otto or anyone else. And I feel like this is the first step into making sure that happens. One other thing about Sir Cole, I think we are getting foreshadowing of an eventual showdown or a duel between him and Daemon. If I had to look for a parallel in the first series, it'll probably be when we had the duel between Ned and Jamie. So we can already see when they had that confrontation in Dragonstone where they were both kind of talking with each other. Damon mispronounced his name, acting like he didn't remember him. And Sir Cole had to remind him, I'm the one that knocked you off your horse in the tourney. So I feel like there's a lot of foreshadowing there. We're going to get an eventual showdown, and probably throughout the season, we're going to see a little bit more of a subtle rivalry between them. And we know for sure that he's dedicated to Rhaenyra. So that makes things very interesting. One last thing I want to touch on, we got a little bit of a time jump, about 6 months. The preview for episode 3, it looks like we're getting another jump, which might be another 6 months or a year. So I kind of like that. I like the fact that we're getting a nice pace and we're not getting bogged down with things, to stretch the story out. I feel like we're going to get a lot of action in the second half of the season. And starting with episode 3 next week, we're going to get a dragon on the battlefield. So that's really cool to see. Speaking of dragons, I felt Rhaenyra's scene at Dragonstone where she came out of the clouds and everything. That is probably one of the best dragon scenes we've had so far in the Game of Thrones series. It just looked wonderful, her coming out of there. And then you had the red dragon, Daemon's dragon, which was watching her and watching, I think, Syrax or Syrax is the name of Rhaenyra's dragon coming through and landing. So animation and all special effects and everything look great. So I am really looking forward to how they're going to do the battle with the crab feeder next episode. So just to sum everything up, I feel like Viserys is heading down that Ned Robb Stark territory. All that surprised us the first time around with Game of Thrones, but we know how things work now. So we know when you're too much in your feelings or in your pride or in your quote unquote honor, that dooms you to death. And I feel like that's what's happening with Viserys. I'd be surprised if he makes it out of this season. I'm worried about Alicent too. I feel like she's a little too pure and a little too innocent to be in this political arena. So she either is going to have to step up quickly, which may happen with these time jumps. We may see a completely different Alicent, 6 months to a year from now. But as of right now, I feel she's the most vulnerable behind Viserys. So let me know what you guys think, particularly with Daemon. I want to hear your thoughts on him as well. Essentially him lying about having a child on the way and everything. So that kind of already has fractured his relationship with Mysaria, Lady Mysaria, who is looking for liberation and peace and not trying to play these political games. So look for her too to see what type of influence she may have on Daemon going forward. So great episode. I wish we can kind of have all of them right to watch it back to back to back, but we're only at episode 2 and everything is flowing wonderfully. I don't have any complaints so far, so let me know what you guys are thinking. Any theories out there, I'd love to hear them. And I will see you next Monday. Just to let you guys know, we try and post these reviews by about 4 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. Maybe I'll get the one for next week a little bit earlier in the morning. All right, guys, so take care, and I will see you next week. And for those of you who are keeping up with the Hulu Tyson series, I'll be having that review up by either Wednesday night or Thursday morning. Take care and have a good one.